We'd actually been together for 3 months before we purchased.
When we discussed the possibility that maybe if I brought you would live with me.
I basically said, I was like, if I'm going to live with you to subsidise your mortgage, I'm going to pay for the mortgage and take on equity. Welcome to Slice, Property Made Possible. We're a platform on a mission to reduce barriers to home ownership. This podcast is a safe space for our community to learn together and build the confidence required to start on their property journey. When you're ready to start, head along to slicetobuy.com and sign up for your free dashboard. We're back with another episode of Slice, and today we're joined by my partner, Glen Spooner. Hi, Glen.
Hello.
So to kick things off, we might discuss a little bit about how we met. So what do you recall about our first meeting, babe?
It was very much a modern romance on the dating apps.
On the dating apps. It was on Hinge.
Yeah, it was.
It's important we give people confidence around which of those apps is, most effective.
Yes. No, Tinder was becoming a bit tacky, maybe?
Tacky?
Is that the right word?
Perhaps.
It was at the end of the second Auckland lockdown in 2021, the one that felt like it went on forever. And we moved to level 3, I think, the picnic dates and walking level. I think that was about all that was allowed.
Yeah. So the romance was forced.
Yeah. I don't even know if hand-holding was legal then. But yeah, that was about all we could do, I think, at the time.
Yeah, it was like picnics and walks. Pretty cute, actually.
Yeah.
Pretty cute. And then we'd obviously not known each other for very long before we purchased. We'd actually been together for 3 months, I think. But obviously there was a rhyme or reason, perhaps, as to why we thought that was an achievable or reasonable to us decision to make. My experience obviously being into purchasing property with others and working through the buying process, but then you went on a journey yourself. Do you want to share a little bit about what that first home journey looked like for you?
Yeah, sure. I lived in Australia over there for about 8 years and returned home with the intention of buying once I'd achieved the deposit that I thought was suitable.
Which was a really decent deposit. Yeah.
And then I started, I guess, and you helped me on the journey of going through the pre-approval process. It wasn't my first intention to go in together, so it wasn't an emotional decision like it might come across. Yes. No, it was a logic, and it was almost like a process of elimination once I started going through that pre-approval, and I very naively thought that the deposit was the be-all and end-all of getting into home ownership, which is completely incorrect. It's the first step.
But a fair assumption, I think, that most people do think that, and you did have a massive deposit.
Yeah, it was reasonable, but it was, I went through this process where I did get pre-approval by myself, and it wasn't quite as high as I was hoping for given the market at the time, and actually
just the cost to make repayments and the serviceability of the loan.
That was the big sticking point, is serviceability. So I went through a few scenarios where each time I would suggest, well, maybe I'll live in a townhouse or an apartment, or I'll buy a house further out and I'll rent it. The buying power dropped, and so when we discussed the possibility that maybe if I brought you would live with me, and you quite rightly said,
I basically said, I was like, if I'm going to live with you to subsidise your mortgage, I'm going to pay for the mortgage and take on equity. Because the other thing is, I think you're kind of overflatting, didn't really want to flat with other people, but the prospect of living with me was more desirable to you. But if it was just going to be you and I was going to have to pay probably a larger amount of rent anyway to support that, at which point it made more sense for me to go, well, if I'm paying down your mortgage indirectly, I'd rather take an ownership share in the property.
Yes, that was a a fair negotiation, I would say, a hard but fair negotiation. And you also quite rightly pointed out the Relationship Property Act, where not that you were going to hold me to it, maybe, although our period is coming up.
Yeah, so you would have been just about done soon.
So that's you're entitled to the 50% stake, I believe.
Yeah, there's basically a risk at any point in your relationship that the courts would find that there's a fair sort of sharing of assets that needs to occur. And that can actually happen at any time. It's not based on years together necessarily, it's circumstantial. So I guess, I sort of said, if we stay together for X amount of time and I'm living in the home and paying rent anyway, there's a very high chance the courts are going to say, well, you own 50% of that. Or you own a percentage of that. So by working through a contracting out agreement, we could sort of negotiate and get on the same page and agree on something that was fair for how we wanted to approach it anyway. And kind of, we managed to do that fairly.
Yeah, and given, I guess, all of that decision making and all that process we'd been through, I felt it best to go in with you, and we had better buying power together with the serviceability. We were able to, the ceiling was much higher on what we could get.
Yeah, I think that was a big one for you, because and for me, if I was to come and live with you, because it was like, oh, well, if you purchased by yourself, then the location might look different as well versus if we purchased together. And funnily enough, we ended up purchasing where I first wanted to purchase and couldn't afford on my own, which was Birkenhead, and then I ended up purchasing in Raglan. Same kind of problem. So what you likely would have had to do, you had a way bigger deposit than I, but you may have not been, in the ideal location that you would have wanted to be in.
Yeah, and location is a big factor, like it would be for everyone. I didn't want to be commuting, sitting in traffic or on a bus or a train for, hours each day.
Ironic though, because we've just commuted from Whangamata for the weekend.
yes, that too.
But that's occasional, and it's
yeah, it is. But given weighing all those factors up, I thought it was worth the risk, and if that risk was managed through like a legal agreement, which we've done, so that it was a process of elimination and logic rather than emotional.
And weighing up
like
your opportunities as well. And then from my perspective, it was like, I have this great platform, which we can test out.
Yes.
And I think, a lot of people would think that 3 months, you're right, that is a emotionally rash decision to make, if it's an emotional decision, but it wasn't. It was a very measured and kind of financial decision. I think it's probably interesting to speak a little bit about what you do for a career as well in that note, because I think that probably speaks to that a little bit too.
Yes, I work in engineering, so all decisions are logic based
and
less emotional.
Yeah.
And nice segue there.
So in terms of, I guess, what we put into our agreement, I think it'd be great to share a little bit about that today. I'm pretty comfortable sharing it if you are. So basically where we landed is we're at, it's not quite 60-40. I think you're slightly above 60 and I'm slightly below 40.
Yeah.
Might be 61 and 39. Can't remember exactly what's in the agreement.
It's a 20. I put down around 25% deposit, and then we split the mortgage repayments 50-50. So it ends up something like a 63-37 split, something like that.
Yeah, cool. So that's all hashed out in our agreement. But to go into a little bit more detail around that, basically, you put that deposit in, and so if there's 100% of the house's value, we remove that deposit first. So we took the 25% away, for example. For the ease of this conversation, I might just say we took 20% out, just so we can use the numbers easily. So we took the 20% deposit out, and there was 80% left in terms of the cost of that property, and we split the mortgage repayments for that 50-50, which is actually 80 divided by 50, or divided by 2, 50% of 80 is 40, which means there's that 40% each, and then you take the deposit, which we already removed, which is 60. So it loosely ends up at 37, 63. But 60-40 if you're using those numbers. And I think that's really great for you because you put up all the deposit, and so you do actually get that deposit back first, and that kind of protects you who's obviously done a lot of the work in terms of getting ready to purchase that property. And then over time we share any kind of profit or loss on that property.
Yeah, so that I guess immediately shows where the Relationship Property Act as a fallback isn't necessarily fit for purpose in our case. And like many people, there've been many different scenarios, and that's sort of how we mitigated that risk of us being together for a very short period of time. Seem to be going okay so far. We're 2 years in.
It was 3 months, now we're at 2 years. And soon you'll probably propose.
We'll see about that.
What a stitch up on the podcast. I had that line saved in my pocket just to make you squirm. But yeah, in terms of that piece, 60-40, I think that was really important. And I actually did push that agreement for that reason, because I do think it's fair and it's in your best interest that your deposit is protected, but also because I have a separate property, being the property in Raglan, and that's outlined as separate to our relationship property. So we sort of, when you go through a contracting out agreement, which contracts out of the Property Relationships Act, essentially it's not just the purchase that you're making at that point in time. It can be all your assets. So you agree on which of those might be shared, which might be separate. Could be down to your car, could be down to the lounge suite, could be down to your jewellery. And you can actually go through all of that and say, hey, actually, yeah, this is separate to our relationship if we do separate. And I think it's actually built trust for us that and confidence that we have a shared kind of financial understanding and shared goals.
Yeah, I think transparency is very key, and playing out scenarios, worst case scenarios, breakups can be very messy. So having that understanding, that was a big way of mitigating the risk of going in together at an early stage, that we know that if the worst comes to the worst, then we know where we stand.
Yeah. And I think that's what gave us the confidence to go and purchase at 3 months. It wasn't without that protection and that process in place that we would have done so otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now it's emotional, not just financial, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too emotional.
I'm pretty financial
I'm
anyway.
joking.
But yeah, I think in saying that, obviously we still have discussions around our finances, and we actually have different probably spending and habits and styles. And I think that's really interesting. It's something that, in early relationships or growing up, I didn't think about much at all. And I don't think my friends did. But now we're kind of moving into more serious relationships. It becomes a really important part of whether or not you guys are compatible, and if you can work through kind of your finances and find a shared understanding.
Yeah, I think the days of one breadwinner normally being the male and the female raising the kids or whatever is done, and people have more independence, I guess. And so,
and then with that, I guess there becomes more visibility for women over the finances, more involvement in the finances, more opportunity to profit or grow improve your financial situation as a couple. But therefore, they have to be more involved in the conversations around how you're managing money and things like that.
Yeah, and it's how we divide up those shared finances. Obviously, I eat more food than you, so things like that to take into consideration.
We haven't yet resolved that one.
Yeah, sometimes you just go a full day and you don't eat.
You're bringing up beef live on air. Shall we unpack that and whether or not we should change the way that we split our food payments on air? Well, are you going to bring the EV into this?
Well, yes, the EV that's not an EV. The ongoing joke that my car is an EV because you don't put petrol in it, so you don't know where it gets its energy source from. It's
I'm building a business. I'm poor.
Yes, you wouldn't know what the price of fuel is at the moment, would you?
No, that's the joke. That I said that to Mum once. Mum was driving, and she said, "Oh, petrol's gone up or down or whatever," and I was like, "Huh."
Yes, but that's what supporting each other looks like. So
It
there
does.
is,
It can be, yeah, I mean, my car actually blew up, and then with building the business, it's not necessarily the right time to go and throw, upwards of 10K really into a car to get a decent car. So we did make that decision to share, and it is to my benefit at the moment. So it is about, I guess, compromising in different ways or sharing in different ways, but it's still something that we have our challenges with and have to continuously have conversations around. But I think something like a contracting out agreement, actually, getting on the same page financially and being forced to have some of those challenging conversations can actually make you a much stronger couple and can set you up for success in your relationship down the line.
yeah, I think every little challenge we generally talk and work through. And
I think one of the main things we have is a willingness to work towards a solution together.
yeah, and we got thrown in the deep end. I guess it's driven by ourselves.
Yeah, throw ourselves in the deep end.
Yes, and so we've had to work through a lot of that on the go.
At the front end of our relationship.
Yes,
But I think that's also so important, because if we hadn't been able to reach an agreement, then we would have, saved a lot of hurt probably down the line.
yeah,
Because a lot of the time what happens is you do sweep those conversations under the rug, and you're sort of caught up in the infatuation of dating and, your new relationship, and you don't necessarily dive into some of those things that are fundamentally going to come between your relationship or going to be a point of conversation at some point. I can't remember what the rate is exactly. I should have Googled it before this, but something like 70% of couples fight over finances and over 40% divorce over financial disagreement.
I can to a degree
I'll add the
see-
stats at the bottom of the episode
Yeah.
because I don't know exactly.
do some fact checking. Yeah, no, I can definitely see how that can happen, because we can have different financial goals as well. So reaching an alignment on financial goals together can be challenging if each person has a different perspective on it, and there's compromise involved and things like that. But just communication, I think, is very key. So it's always
If you can't have that communication up front when you're buying the property, you probably shouldn't be buying a property together.
No, not at all. It's kind of burying your head in the sand, really.
And then it's going to create more hurt down the line. Like, that's where, and one of the biggest challenges, funnily enough, was saying this with Simon Bridges the other day, but he was saying he feels really bad for the vulnerable kind of older people that actually separate or divorce. They had a home and they lose that family home because of separation, and then they can't get back in. So that's the worst possible situation. It becomes a lot harder to buy property or to, find your financial well-being and independence that late in your life. So that you really want to front foot that.
It would be very much a loss of identity in a way, and lifestyle creeps hard. You can't going backwards. Can be a struggle, I guess.
Yeah.
So once you're used to something, going completely changing that can be a massive struggle.
Yeah. So I think it is about getting as much of that on the table about what your financial expectations are, what contributions you're going to make, which leads me to a thought around contributions, because I also said, obviously, I'm very busy with my business and I don't have time to do any renovation. So when we were first looking, I feel Glen's quite a handyman, so I feel like you do sort of look at, exciting new project, or like, I can do this, this and this. And I sort of said, even after 3 months, I was like, I won't be doing any of that. So if we buy something like that, I'll be inside of my computer working on Slice and you'll be out there. How do you think we'll manage that? So I think I had the maturity maybe at that point to know what I was able to contribute and to communicate that, because that could have been a real challenge if we had bought a renovation together after knowing each other for 3 months.
Yeah, I'm glad in hindsight that you did communicate that, because as time has shown...
I'm not in the garden.
Yes.
I've lived up to the expectations that I set.
Yes, you did hold true to your word. Yeah, I'm glad. And I'm also glad, I guess...
Some of the properties we were looking at, like that Chatswood property.
Yeah, it was great in the way that for context, I guess it had this beautiful Kodi tree in the middle of the front deck, and it was surrounded by native bush, and that framed what we wanted. We agreed that we really loved like the idea of the birds surrounding the house, and feeling after that Auckland lockdown, feeling that if we were going to be working from home a lot more, as I guess modern workplaces do, that we wanted to not feel like we were confined so much. And so that was a really good vibe of what we wanted to find. And so we did eventually find that, but just a house that we thought had a bit less work involved.
We got quite clear on, I think, what our shared requirements were or desires were. We're narrowed down the location and both agreed on that first, and then went, what kind of house do we want? And once we realised we both wanted trees and native bush, that became a lot easier because it narrowed the types of properties that we were looking at. So I think for buyers, that's a really key thing to consider when you're purchasing in a relationship or, with anyone else, is actually what are your must-haves? What do you both want? What do you even finding actually the things that you both want is almost enough, because then you're kind of looking and knowing that, this meets that criteria. And there's not that much stock. It's not like you can get absolutely everything on your list, but just having a few core kind of desires that you both are keen for, I guess.
Yeah, it was just starting with going to open homes and seeing one property and going, no, we don't want that, and finding the common points that we did like.
Yeah, because then we even found lots of trees, but there was shade and damp. So we're no, north facing with trees.
Yeah, and so I guess in terms of a search filter, it was narrowing all of those things down
into our filters.
Yeah, and eventually we found what we were after. But yeah, it was an interesting time when you've been together for a short period of time to find that. But
I guess that's just another early test for our relationship, though, if we could find that we had these shared values and these shared wants, and we did. So I guess in a way it just validated that, potentially we are more compatible than we may have thought. But I think also we're probably, you're a bit older, so maybe you knew what you wanted in a partner more, and you just saw me and you're like, whoa, she's a real cool chick.
Don't flatter yourself too much, please. You already do enough of that off air.
Off air. I don't reckon I do.
No, you are a great partner. And time has proven that.
A great partner that lives up to her set expectations of not doing renos on a house.
Yeah, and after doing the painting with you, I realised why you weren't in it for the long haul.
Oh, we're really airing our dirty laundry now. Go on.
No, we do share our responsibilities on the day-to-day, so it's not like a case of you're not pulling your weight, and you laid that expectation out, and I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
I'm glad I did too. If I didn't have the maturity to do that, I think we would have been in for a big challenge. But I knew that if I didn't have a business and wasn't trying to, help other people into home ownership, maybe I would take on a reno and I would do things like that. But I just know I don't have the time or energy for that.
No, and even I'm quite thankful that we didn't take a big reno on it. It seems, I think...
It's exciting that you're like, oh, fun, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And then you move into the property and you're like, I won't do anything.
If you have the energy to, it would have been...
Yeah, and if it's something you're passionate about, then yes, but it's a big risk to potentially do that as your first purchase unless you know that you're... handy and it's something that you've got the time and energy for. And if there's any doubts that one of the partners doesn't, then I think you can find yourself up shit creek, to be honest.
It would have been like...
Because then you have resentment and things, because you're like, oh, you're not supporting and I'm doing X, Y, Z, and that person never wanted to do that. Or I think there's a broader conversation around that. Like, we're using renovations as an example where we've successfully communicated our way through that, but I guess it's shared contributions in general. Like, it could be doing the dishes, doing the washing, doing the cooking, doing the cleaning. There's another example actually of, I'm kind of making myself look crap, but there's another example of where I said, actually, yeah, I want to get a cleaner. I went to a talk on, women and entrepreneurship, and they said it is super hard owning your own business, and don't forget that there are ways to make that easier for yourself, whether it's, getting some care for your children, or whether it's getting a cleaner in once a month, or whatever it is. So they sort of flagged that idea for me, and then I ran with it. And so I said, yeah, if I can get a cleaner even once a fortnight, that would really prevent you taking on more of those activities, and then potentially there being resentment. You're like, I'm happy to do that. Like, I'll do it. It's fine. I don't want to spend the money. And then I sort of said, yeah, but then you might actually end up resenting me. So we managed to kind of communicate our way through that one as well.
Yeah, I was initially hesitant. I thought we could manage that. Now I clean for the cleaner in anticipation of the cleaner coming.
Yeah.
But I think the finance side, we sort of made things work. We made changes. We do our regular pack and save shop now rather than...
Yeah, that's right.
We found a way to save the extra money.
That's how I got it across the line, actually. It was a little bit of tact and negotiation, and I said spoons. I call Glen spoons, but I said, spoons, what if I reduce our grocery bill by X, then can we get a cleaner? And then you said yes.
Yes.
And so now we shop at Pack and Save, and we would save easily $40 a week. It's crazy how much cheaper that supermarket is than any of the other options.
Yeah, if there's one close enough by, then it's just common sense to go there.
Yeah, it's a little bit busy, but I feel like you can manage. And
Life is busy.
Life is busy, yeah. We're actually trying to tell our friends to go there the other day, and they're like, oh, but Pack and Save on a Sunday. I was like, oh, well, if you save $40 though, it all helps. I think one thing that's been really interesting, we've just moved down to Whangamata recently. Very lucky, but Spooner's family have a batch there, and so we've Airbnb'd our place out, and we're making about 10 grand on that over the summer, and just staying down there and working remote. So that's been a really great opportunity, and another way to identify how we can kind of do different things, because we want to re-roof. So how can we get that money together? Or if you want to clean it, how can you get that money? So it's really about being creative. And my friend's much the same. Nikki, who we've been staying with while we're in Auckland, has been, Airbnb this room out because I want a cleaner this week. Or, it's about, if you do want some of those more, I guess, they're not necessities. So if you do have some desires or wants that aren't exactly a bare necessity, then be creative about how you can get the funds together.
Yeah, it is a privilege to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
We're well aware of that, but
it's a privilege that's available to us. So why not use that opportunity? And that exact privilege is not always going to be available, but it might be moving home with your parents over summer.
Yeah, so there are alternatives that you can pull resources, family and friends, and try different things like the Airbnb route, just to find,
identify what your opportunities are, basically.
Yeah, and we were thinking, how are we going to get this extra amount of money to do some maintenance on the house? Yeah,
on that note, we had a few friends come to stay with us in Whangamata as well, and funnily enough, we were playing a game of Finska. Like card, where you throw the pieces of wood at the other pieces of the wood, but you collect the points.
Yeah, Scandinavians do love throwing wood at other objects.
Do. So naturally, we thought we can do that. So we were playing that, and as we were playing, I decided to bring up the finances and how each of the couples, there were 3 couples, ourselves included, how each of them managed that. And it was really interesting, and I'm super pumped about our probably generation.
We're in the same generation.
So anyway, I'm pumped that we are able to more readily have those conversations. I know that it wasn't common practice with a lot of our parents to kind of delve into the finances. I know a lot of husbands did that, had visibility, and wives didn't. And it is really important, I think, from a female's, perspective, to have potentially an emergency fund, or their own car, or their own kind of property to the side so that if that relationship isn't a healthy one, they do have a way out. But I think it was really interesting talking with the different couples about how they've come to manage that. One of the couples has merged all of their funds together. The other couple haven't done that, and then we haven't done that either. And so just actually talking about what that looks like. And in the shared couple, they basically put everything together and then had an amount left each week that individually they were able to spend, so almost like an allowance. And then in our circumstances, we have a shared account where we pay for, bills and food and that kind of thing from, and we split the accounts for sort of fixed costs like rates and insurance. We split that in relation to our equity share of the home. But then in terms of the variable costs, so just the cost of living, like power and internet, we do that 50-50. So it's really interesting to actually hear about and be able to discuss, I think, with some of our friends what they do. Other friends in Melbourne we're with, and they said, yeah, they do the food at a different percentage, which I think is what prompted our conversation around whether or not it should be 50-50 if one of us is pigging out more.
Someone's been pigging out on the fuel in my car, though.
They have been.
So,
it comes in waves. But, yeah, it's really interesting. And I think we're really fortunate that we can have those conversations with our friends. So I'd really encourage, others in the audience to actually bring that up. You'd be surprised how willing people are to talk about it, and also how interesting it is to find out what different people are doing. And I mean, comparison is the death of joy. So it's not necessarily going, oh, they're doing it this way, so we need to do that. But it's more just taking from that what is working for them in their relationship and why, and then potentially reviewing how you're doing things and just being able to communicate and have that transparency and shared network around finances. Because even though we said, like at the very beginning, you said finance and emotion are separate, ultimately the two really kind of cross paths a lot of the time. Like a lot of people feel emotional about their finances.
Yeah, and we've found out that by just communicating with each other, but also I guess there will be different stages you go through too. Like obviously if you have a child, that throws the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of incomes, for example. So your expectations may change over time, and that's potentially where merging finances becomes a more logical thing to do.
Even then, I don't know if we ever fully will. But, I mean, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, should you be lucky enough to get to that bridge with me. But yeah, I think it's great that we have these conversations, though, and that we are able to be, like, quite open and talk to each other. Because I think that, as you say, if the circumstances are changing, then you kind of have to have the conversation again. So you sort of need to have this in your skill set. Like, you need to be able to communicate around finances and do that with your partner in order to, for the betterment of your relationship.
Yeah, and you don't want to ruin a relationship over finance. It seems like a bit of
almost a shallow thing. But
a petty thing to destroy a relationship, but I can easily see it happening.
Yeah, because I also think, though, if you're so far apart and you can't reach agreement, and maybe one of the partners is really unreasonable, then it probably is, reason to, as good enough reason as some of the other silly reasons that we end relationships. But I think it's just one of the biggest challenges when you do get into a serious relationship. And so the sooner you can start having some of those conversations and building out your ability to problem solve together and share your expectations and what you expect to contribute, what you're hoping for with your future, like this, the more you build that up and the more you get comfortable having those. Otherwise, like, I don't feel like it's that difficult for us. I do find it awkward sometimes to discuss certain things that I'd be like, oh, we might have a different view here. But I think you get better and better at having that conversation over time, and it needs to be an open line of communication.
Yeah, initially we probably had more struggles at the beginning.
Yeah.
We've reached alignment a lot more as time has gone on.
And then we might have struggles again if we choose to have a child or something, because it's like a new circumstance, it's like a new problem to solve, or a new time to find alignment.
Yeah, 100%.
So in terms of your first home buyer journey, what advice would you give to others that are going through the process?
I would just seek help from others who have been through that process, or a little plug for Slice. You could follow they jump on the Slice platform and go through the buyer's process on there, the dashboard. For me, coming from an engineering background, I was quite shocked at sort of how it didn't seem to be a well set out logical process. There's a lot of information out there, but it's not, I guess, congregated well, I didn't think.
So almost overwhelming, like there's
Yeah.
too much information as opposed to, exactly what do I have to do.
Yeah, and I guess conversely, my field is trying to make things simple. A lot of fields are similar, where you take something complex and make it as simple as possible, and going step by step. Like, have you got a lawyer, for example? It's just like one thing that I didn't consider. For me, it was just get the deposit and get the pre-approval. There were so many factors I just wasn't aware of, and you helped me through that. But then after going through that, I thought, well,
Why
okay,
is
why
this so hard?
why hasn't this been laid out really clearly? Because it's not that difficult. There's a lot of repeat process in there that everybody needs to do.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it, right? That, thousands of people buy property across the world, and yet every time they follow the process in a different way. Like there is actually one process, and that's what we've tried to do at Slice, is just support people through following one. And it actually can apply globally, that the process is much the same. Some of the legislation is different, but the process is one process when it comes to purchasing a property.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I don't have anything to add to that. Might have to cut that out.
I kind of want to keep it. It's funny. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I remember you mentioning is that you're wondering whether that's because like the system's set up like to almost be more difficult, or not to enable and not to provide access to people.
Yeah, in the field of anything finance related, sometimes I'm a big skeptic, and I think back to like the movie The Big Short, and they have all these different, what are they called, synthetic CDOs, and all these just ridiculous names to convolute the process to make, for
Even
the average,
convolute is a convoluted word.
yes, for the average punter, it's making things confusing rather than simplifying things.
Yeah.
And so maybe I saw some parallels with that, and maybe
Question
me being a
whether or not
skeptic,
that was
thinking,
intentional.
yes. And so, again, going back to what I said before, is that, hey, it doesn't need to be this complicated. You don't need to reinvent the wheel each time.
Yeah.
That there are steps you can take out.
And I think you're right, but I don't know that, having worked in banking myself, I don't know that it's intentional so much as no one makes money out of it. So a lot of what we have done on the Slice platform for buyers is not, we give away free home buyers software, and it educates and takes you through those steps. I reckon the reason banks and, other real estate agents or partners in the space haven't bothered to do that is because it's not a money maker for them. And so that's why it's just, we will do co-ownership, come to us, but they're not necessarily stepping you through the process. They're just trying to sell you a loan, or, trying to sell you some other product. I just don't think there's been enough value perceived for them to bother.
Yeah, and also there's multiple components. So each different stakeholder, like a real estate agent, mortgage broker, lawyer, etc.,
they're all separate processes as well.
And whereas like Slice is trying to congregate that all and say, go through this step first, then this step. And so
collaborate with those partners at the time when you need to. And we're actually trying to get those partners to follow our processes.
Yes, and I think that bringing that all together for the average punter out there trying to buy a house is very helpful, and using that at the time. Luckily, I had that all in your brain that I could leverage. But had I been by myself, I guess I would have been relying on family members and friends. But even then,
there's a bit of misinformation as well that comes from that.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, we're down to our last question, which is, if our home had a doorbell, your first home had a doorbell, and that doorbell played a theme song, what song would it play?
Sandstorm by the Road.
What? I would not want that playing every time someone tried to come into the house.
Would that not hype you up for your guest?
I mean, it would be very big hype, very big hype.
Imagine getting your Uber Eats delivered while Sandstorm by the Road is playing.
Is that the one?
Yeah, you got there in the end.
I'm butchering it, but
yeah. I was not going to do that. You were supposed to be the musical one.
I don't think you can very easily do Sandstorm acoustic.
No.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, and thank you for sharing in our relationship and some of the intimate details with our audience. I hope it will really help, because I know that the majority of people do buy with partners, and a lot of them aren't necessarily dotting their I's and crossing their T's and having those conversations that they need to have to, enable and protect their relationships.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining our community. Buying property isn't easy, but listening in will get you one step closer on your journey. Please leave an Apple or Spotify review and provide feedback so we can improve your experience. Join our Facebook group, A Safe Space to Learn Together, or follow us on Instagram at Slice2Buy. If you have any questions or topics you would like us to touch on, you can email us at hello@slice2buy.com. A quick reminder, Slice the podcast does not provide personalised investment advice. We are not acting as financial advisors or taking into account your circumstances. To get personalised advice, join us at slice2buy.com and engage with our partners who can act as your financial advisor or lawyer and support you with your specific needs.